Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind at Penn State University, filming from the Delta Chi fraternity. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna C. Nadella, and this is State of Mind. Today's episode is part one of a two-part series entitled Sandusky, 5 Years Later. We're taping from the Delta Chi fraternity house here at Penn State University. As a proud and active alum, the school holds a very special place in my heart and always will. With that said, for myself and the majority, if not all, of the alumni community, there's one word that evokes an emotional response like no other: Sandusky. 5 years ago, on November 5th, 2011, Jerry Sandusky, former defensive coordinator for the Penn State Nittany Lions football team, was arrested on 40 criminal counts relating to sexual crimes against minors. Now, this series is not about rehashing what has been so well documented in the press over the past 5 years. The purpose of this series is to talk about the experiences and stories that were never told, namely of the people who attended and attend Penn State University and how they overcame the darkest moment in the university's history. As the State of Mind team was putting this series together, we ultimately realized that it would be unfair of me to ask questions of any alum or student if I myself wasn't willing to be put under the microphone first and offer my own perspectives. As such, in a State of Mind first, I'll be serving as a guest and passing on the moderating duties to Lexi Shimkonis, Penn State Junior and Managing Editor of Onward State. Lexi, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks Krishna for having me. So I guess we'll just get started. Take me through the events of November 2011. What was going on in your mind during that time?
Well, I remember watching it on television. It was actually on the evening news at 6:30, and my father-in-law asked me to head over because I don't watch the evening news anymore, because I watch it through the internet. And I realized very quickly that this was not good. This was starting to get national attention. I didn't think much of it because I didn't know who Sandusky was. From my understanding, he retired in 1998, and as such, there was a sense that this was not really a Penn State University issue. This is more of a criminal issue that needed to be addressed by the authorities. But like most things, the court of public opinion is the one that matters to many, and this was starting to be all looped into one bigger and bigger problem in the sense that Penn State University, Jerry Sandusky, Penn State football, all were starting to be examined at a national level. For myself, as a very active alum sitting on 4 different boards at the time, I realized that this was going to be a question that I'd have to start dealing with and figuring out what was going on to make sure I had most educated answers as well. Truthfully, I wasn't prepared for it. I don't think anyone ever is. And the days that followed were very much a learning process.
So what was it like being an alum during that time, both personally and professionally?
I think as an alum, you always come back to school with great memories of what it's like to be a student. You always think about the positive things that you went through. You really think about what helped you develop as a person. And so that positivity is what leads you as an alum. In a situation like this, it really didn't hit me, I think, early on because I didn't know how it connected with me. I didn't have a sense of a connection with Sandusky or with what was going on with academic administration. Remember, this was something that was more through the people that were running the university. This is more through law enforcement. So it took some time to really get my thoughts together. But I realized, I think, more so when I got to work. People started asking questions. The jokes started, the references. And I remember one individual in particular. When I was talking to him, he said, "You knew Krishna, didn't you? You knew about this." And I said, "Are you kidding? I have no idea who Jerry Sandusky is." And most alums would tell you the same thing. Most students, for the most part, would absolutely have no idea who he was. So in many ways, that's when you start to realize it doesn't matter if you feel that this is not your problem. As a Penn State alum, you had to be able to deal with it, and you had to be able to address it in a very coherent and educated manner. But the problem is we were learning as we go. And as we were going, so was the media. So we didn't have time to get ahead of this in many ways.
So what did Penn State mean to you before? What did Penn State football mean to you also?
So Penn State University, in many ways, was tied to Penn State football when I was applying. Now, as an individual growing up in Canada, it was one of those situations where I knew it from afar. I knew about Joe Paterno and the brand and the class that he was developing here. Students were graduating. We were doing things on the field and off the field with I think, a class that was really unparalleled across the country. So for me, I thought of Penn State as something that was an entity unto itself, and something that most people really gravitated towards and wanted to be part of. At the same time, I also felt like the university couldn't separate itself from the football program, and that comes with good and the bad. So in many ways, I thought of Penn State University as a football school that had great academics. And I say that intentionally because I lead with the football as how I perceived the school before all this happened.
So how did that change now? What's your opinions now on Penn State and the football program?
Well, I think with anything after some sort of traumatic event, and I really do think Sandusky was a traumatic event for this university. No different than for those who live in New York, you talk about pre and post 9/11. For those who worked in Wall Street, pre and post financial crisis. For those in Penn State, it's pre and post Sandusky. And you really start to see the separation. And in the years that passed, I also realized I had to grow up as an alum. And what I mean by that is, in my 20s, before all this happened, there was a naivety to how universities work. You think of them in a very romantic fashion. You think about all the great things that are happening, and you look back with the fondness of making friends and memories and working with people during your time here. What happened after this event played out was that you realize this is no different than a corporation. When you think of a university, it's a multi-billion-dollar institution. Presidents are like CEOs. Deans are like vice presidents. Students are like consumers. And your degree is like a stock certificate. And as the news comes and goes, and as you continue to have market-making, impactful news, whether it be positive or negative, it affects you personally from the standpoint of the value of your degree. And so after this all happened, I had to be a lot more, I think, mindful of the romanticism had to be tempered. And I had to really look at things from the standpoint of what's in the best interest for the people coming out of this university? What is in the best interest for the university as a whole? And not look at any individual institution within it. And that meant Penn State football had to be separated. And it had to be looked at in isolation because I sit as the president of the Graduate School Alumni Society. There are some top faculty and administration. We have some of the best research coming out of this university, and they have no idea what's going on with Penn State football. More importantly, they don't care. They didn't come to this country. They didn't come to apply for national funding because of a football team. They came here because they want to do cancer research. They came here because they want to be able to put a satellite on the moon. And so that's when all of a sudden Penn State football became very small in the greater part of Penn State University for me. And I think that's what happened, is that it became about the university first, and it was no longer a football school with great academics. It was an academic institution with a football program.
So some alumni, or most alumni I would say, have different levels of involvement after they leave. Some come here for their degree and then that's it, they just came to Penn State. How do you think that the Sandusky, the whole situation, you think it brought you back more to Penn State and connected you more with the university? Or do you think had it not happened, you would have stayed so connected to Penn State?
Well, when it happened, I was a member of the annual Giving Advisory Council for Penn State University, and we were in the middle of a $2 billion capital campaign called For the Future, the Campaign for Penn State Students. And any sort of campaign, whether you're raising $1 million or $2 billion, requires a lot of people, requires a lot of passionate volunteers to give their time to help raise funds, because you're asking people for money. An event like this, you really start to worry whether or not this is something you want to be part of, because now you're not really thinking you're going to get $2 million. That goal is not going to happen anymore. What happened, though, is that we started to see alums double down. We realized that we are the university as much as anyone else is. And this is our home. This is our pedigree. This is our brand. This is the degree that we have on our walls at home in frames, on our college degrees. And so I never once thought about scaling back my time with Penn State. If anything, I felt like now more than ever, now is the time to really make sure I make myself available. I think with anything, whether you look at your family, whether you look at your friends, you're always going to be there when they're down. You're always going to be there when they need your help. Well, why would I not think of the same way with Penn State University? This was my home. This is where I grew up. This is what made me who I am. So to walk away and say, I'm out, I think would be a complete hypocritical approach to how I like to live my life. And if I really do bleed blue and white, then there was only one option, and that was to make sure I continued to be engaged.
So then looking into the university, there's a lot of high levels of university officials involved. Did that change your perception of authority figures at all after the, everything came out?
Oh yeah. And I think that's also a little bit of that romanticism that has to leave. When I was a student here, Graham Spanier was larger than life. And for those that don't know, he was the president at the time. Graham Spanier was just this amazing figure who was so receptive to students. He was great at fundraising. I mean, so much of our capital campaigns were, through him. At the same time, getting time to talk to him and get in front of him, that was a big deal. I put him on a pedestal. But then you realize we're all just humans, and we all have decisions to make, and we're defined by those decisions. And I think that's ultimately what really made me grow up, is to say, these are just people with jobs, and they have responsibilities that come with them. Graham Spanier was no different. He had a job to do, and I'm not here to question whether or not he did a good or bad job. But that job has responsibilities that come with it, and I, as an alum, have a right to question the decisions he makes, and I have to be willing to do that. Because you can't romanticize people in power, because when you do, then you all of a sudden take away your choice to be critical when you need to.
So now a lot of those university officials are, out, but recently they honored Paterno for his 50th anniversary of his first game. What are your opinions on that, and then on Paterno in general?
So very quickly, I personally felt it was in poor taste. I'll just say that right out from the gate. Not because he doesn't deserve it, not because there isn't a time and place for that, but ultimately, we have to remember that there were people that suffered, there were victims here, and we can't ever forget them. When you think about why this all happened, there were young children that were abused. Young children that were abused that didn't have a voice, and unfortunately, the university didn't speak fast enough for them. And as such, this happened. Whether or not Joe Paterno knew or didn't know, none of us will ever know. We were not there. We were not in the court transcripts. We were not there for any of the hearings. But what I do know is that we have to be mindful of the court of public opinion. And the university is a very large, state-run organization that has to answer to the taxpayers of the state of Pennsylvania. And in that regard, we can't be so ignorant to think that it's us against them. We have to be mindful of the community that we're part of. And in many ways, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to be as a university? If we want to be something that represents a lesson learned and the willingness to get up and move forward, then we need to all agree on that. But I don't necessarily feel at this point in time the university is consistent in that. I think there are two factions. I think there are those that want to be able to move forward and think about Penn State in 2016. And there are many who still want to live in the glory days of the 80s when we won 2 national championships. And because of that, it's going to be a fight for a while. It's going to be a fight because there's a lot of alums who feel that way. And that's not to say either one is wrong, either one is right. But we need to figure out what we want to be. With regards to Joe Paterno, I think more than anything else, he's a great man that was put in a position where he had to make a decision, and he will be remembered for that decision. He is a great cautionary tale of what happens when we put anyone on a pedestal and we don't think about the fact that we have to be able to question all of our leaders and at any point in time to make sure that we're keeping everyone accountable. No one in any academic institution should ever be bigger than the institution itself.
So when they did announce that 50 year, they were going to honor Paterno in some way at that game, a lot of the people outside of Penn State really kind of had a lot of backlash towards it, especially social media and everything like that. And a lot of what happens when something like, this what happened to Penn State, the public, so much of the opinion is the reputation of the university. Do you think that the current perception of Penn State is fair?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, perception is subjective. It's not objective. You are entitled to have an opinion of the university. And if enough people, the majority of the people, feel a certain way about this school, then it's absolutely fair. The question is not what's the perception now. The question is what are you willing to do about it moving forward? Are you willing to move forward and acknowledge the issues that happened, and more to the point, show the solutions to make us move forward? If we're willing to do that, if we're willing to say we are making changes, then with time, because time is the great healer, then we will eventually get there. But if we are not willing to do that, and then we're still surprised how people perceive us, and you can go to any message board on ESPN.com when there's a Penn State story, and you'll see your fair share of vitriol towards this school. Then all of a sudden you have warranted justification for people to feel the way they do. And so to that point, is it fair? As of right now, I think so. I don't think we've necessarily done enough to promote the positivity that we've been putting out there, to promote the changes. We're not talking about those things when it comes to sexual predatory abuse against children. We need to spend more time talking about that. It's not the most interesting news, but it's stuff that needs to be promoted so people understand changes are being made. So I'd like to see more of that. And again, in the court of public opinion, it's not my responsibility to go out and find that information. It's the responsibility of the organization to make it available to me.
So 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, how do you hope to see the university respond, and what do you hope to see the public perception respond to that?
Well, I think you're going to need a generation, because this is a scar. This is a virtual scar on this university. And every academic institution will have one scar or another. Some are more major than others. And that goes with anything in society. This is how we grow. This is how we develop. We stumble. We fall. But ultimately, 10, 20, 30 years from now, I'd like to see this school become a leader when it comes to protecting children. When it says that because of this, we realized we needed to do more, but more importantly, we did. And now, if you are someone who wants to study about how to protect children, how to make sure we avoid situations like this going forward, and what type of organizations we're working for, Penn State's the one school that would be the #1 school to go to for that. Public opinion, public perception, looks. You're going to graduate in a couple of years. I've already graduated from here. I'm proud that I went to Penn State University because I came here for an academic education. And so I'm fine with the perception even now because it means that I'm not embarrassed by where I went. But I also know that I'm part of the solution. I can help change that perception. I can continue to be involved with the school. I can speak on behalf of the school. I can be an ambassador for the school. And that starts with all of us. Remember, no one individual is going to change the perception of this school. It takes all of us. And because of that, in many ways, we have the power, and that's really, I think, what people need to remember.
So this whole experience, what have you learned from this, and how has that helped mold you?
Well, I think we are seeing some of it. State of Mind, this TV show, came out of this experience. Now, there was a few other factors that really led into me wanting to create this show. The Virginia Tech shootings, the suicide at Rutgers. I realized very quickly that there is a tremendous amount of social, political, and economic issues in the college setting. There's more than just what's in the textbook. And because of that, I'm trying to do something positive here. And we're in our 3rd season of State of Mind, and I think we're doing something good to help bring awareness to these issues. And if the Sandusky issue actually had something to do with that, then maybe that's a positive silver lining we can all look to.
So what advice would you give to current students now, being an alum, looking back?
Well, actually, as a student, this is probably the most real experience you can ever think of, because you're making a conscious choice and effort to be able to say, I am going to deal with this issue head on. I'm going to accept it. And in life, you're going to get a lot of stuff thrown at you. So whether or not you're right or wrong, the key is to be able to move forward and realize that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And Penn State's journey is still continuing. We have not resolved the Sandusky issue, nor will we, nor should we. It's an ongoing discussion, ongoing process, and I think that's with life. You're going to graduate from here in 4 years, but that doesn't mean it ends. You have a lot more to accomplish, and it's important to remember that and keep that in mind.
So going off of that, what advice would you give to parents, and not only parents that have never, first generation parents, they didn't go to Penn State, but also parents that have a long lineage of coming here, they were here in the Paterno era.
Right. Well, don't forget, this is a great academic institution, and that's what we should always lead with, just like we lead with student athletes. The athletic component of this school is a part of who we are, but it is not everything that we are. And because of that, let's not forget what makes this university great. Our funding for higher level research, our students who are acknowledged and accomplished throughout the community, Greek life and what they're doing with Thon. These are things we need to spend more time talking about. And that's what we should harp on. And even with regards to Penn State football, these are some really amazing kids. And let's not forget that. The students at the end of the day are what make this university great. And as a parent, let's not ever forget. Let's double down on our students and remember, they're the ones we can bank on.
So looking back on the entire experience, what advice do you have for the viewers?
I'm a big fan of the Rocky Balboa films, and for those that have seen it, there's a very poignant speech where he gives to his son about his perspectives on life. And I don't have it memorized, but I'll do my best to kind of repeat it here. And it goes something as such. Let me tell you something you already know. The world isn't all sunshine and rainbows. It is a mean and nasty place, and it will beat you to your knees if you let it, permanently. You, me, or nobody is going to get hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you can take the hits and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. At the end of the day, life is about the journey. Life is about being able to take the hits. Penn State took the hit. Now we need to move forward. When you think about that, that ultimately is what we are known for. Being able to roll up our sleeves and come together as a community and move forward. We are a community. We are a family. We are an academic institution. We are students. We are faculty. We are administration. We are passionate people. And ultimately, we are Penn State. And that's the message I'd like to give to our viewers.
Okay. I think that was all the questions I had.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
On that note, that will wrap up our show for today. If you like what you saw in today's episode, please feel to like, share, comment, and subscribe on the social media platforms at the bottom of your screen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the time. And remember, every life is a book.
Make yours a bestseller.
Have a great state of mind.